Okay, I think we can start. So, yeah, hello everyone. I'm Carmen Alvarez Castro. I'm researcher at University Pablo de Olavide currently, but since I've been some years at the CMCC, I'm still affiliated to the CMCC. And now, well, just to orient it a bit about what the CMCC is, let me share some slide to introduce you about the CMCC. So the CMCC, well, is a global scientific institution focused on the study and the modeling of the climate change, and the study of the effects of on the society, and it is divided also in three main institutes. One institute for the Earth system predictions, another institute for the climate resilience, and another one about the European Institute on Economics and Environment. It is one of the main supercomputing centers in Europe. Actually, it's one of the since 2008. It is one of the most powerful computational facility in Italy, and it's fully dedicated to the climate change research. And this is all the characteristics of the supercomputing. And the CMCC is also divided, is organized in different network distributed through Italy, and in amazing cities in Italy, as Milano, Bologna, Venezia, Viterbo, Caserta, Lecce, and Sassari. And all of them concerning issues of interest about the climate science, divided in these three institutions. There are some members of an institutional partners, the National Institute of Geophysics and Volcanology in IGEO, and other universities in Italy. And about this webinar, you will have the opportunity to ask to the speaker today some questions in the question and answer session in Zoom. So, well, after this brief introduction of the CMCC, I would like to, well, now it is my great pleasure to introduce my colleague, David Barriopedro, who is the speaker today. David got his PhD in 2007 in physics at the University Complutense of Madrid in Spain. And since 2017, he's a senior scientist at IGEO, so the Geoscience Institute within the National Scientific Spanish Center of Research, CSIC. And basically, he has focused his research on the study of the climate variability and the climate change from synoptic to paleoclimatic studies, with a special interest in atmospheric circulation, including synoptic climatology, for instance, the blocking studies and weather patterns studies, and extreme events, especially heat waves and droughts, and also historical climate and paleoclimate of the last millennium, and some stratosphere, troposphere coupling and variability studies. So today he's going to present an attribution of, he's going to share with us some attribution of extreme events in the framework of the European project H2020 Climate Intelligence, CLINT. And thank you very much, David, to accept this invitation to give this webinar. And now the floor is yours.
So, thank you, Maria.
Another thing for the audience, sorry, David, is I will share with you I will transmit to the speaker, to David, some of the questions that you will during the presentation write in the question and answer section. So yeah, now yes.
Thank you, Maria Carmen. Can you see the screen?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. So thanks to all for attending this talk. This talk is a part of the webinar series organized by CLINT. CLINT is an European project, and it aims to provide a toolbox of machine learning algorithms in order to explore to advance in the science of extreme events and also the associated impacts in a number of socioeconomic sectors. So it is structured in different branches and different work packages, but today's talk is going to be about the attribution of extreme events to climate change. Okay, I have divided the presentation in three parts. The first one is an overview of extreme event attribution and the illustration of different methods that have been developed in the literature for the attribution of extreme events. The second part is an application to a case study, which in this case is the European heatwave of 2022. And finally, I will end with describing some developments that are being carried out within the CLINT project in order to explore the potential of machine learning algorithms for the attribution of extreme events. So let's start with the overview. Here, this slide shows the evolution of the attribution science in time. Attribution can be defined as the process of evaluating the role of different contributing factors to either a change in the climate system or to a particular extreme event or to the impacts associated with that event. And the attribution science has different branches, and it started in the 1990s with the attribution of long-term changes in the climate system, mainly global mean temperature, but not only. And in this part, I include it's also include the changes in the extremes, in the statistics of extremes. For example, the increasing frequency of hot days. So thanks to this science, we know that changes in the frequency and intensity of many types of extreme events are largely due to anthropogenic forces at global scale. However, it does not mean that every single extreme event can be individually be attributed to climate change. And that is the topic of the extreme event attribution that started at the beginning of the 21st century. This part of the attribution science focuses on the assessment of the influence of climate change or any other causal factor on a particular specific extreme event. So this is much more challenging than attributing changes in the mean climate. And more recently, there have also been developments towards the attribution of the impacts associated with extreme events. And I illustrate here three examples of these three types of three branches of the attribution science. One is the attribution of global mean temperatures. The second one is the attribution, is the first study, extreme event attribution study, which was that of the European heatwave of 2003 by Stott et al. In 2004. And the last example is the attribution of heat-related mortality during that heatwave in Paris. Okay, so there are examples of different attribution studies or different types of attribution. But today we are going to focus on the attribution of extreme events. I mean, only the hazard. Okay, and it has been now 20 years since that landmark paper by Stott et al. And since then, there have been many attribution studies for very different types of extreme events all around the world. And here I collect some examples of these attribution studies that you can find in the literature. The longest in history is the annual special issue, which is published every year by the Bulletin of the American Meteorological Society. They compile several examples of extreme events that affected, that occur anywhere in the world during that specific year, and provides different examples of attribution methodologies. On the right of this slide, you can see also examples of the so-called fast attribution. They are international initiatives to provide a fast answer just a few days or weeks after the event has occurred. And they include the world weather attribution and more recently the climate meter. So based on all this evidence, we can say that the extreme event attribution is becoming a material science. And yes, we can make statements for many extreme events about the influence of climate change on that particular specific extreme event. However, the confidence in attribution often depends on the type of extreme event that we want to attribute. This is summarized in this nice figure, which illustrate the state-of-the-art capabilities for attribution, and the confidence in when attributing extreme events to climate change depends on a number of factors that are summarized here in this axis, the horizontal one, which measures the level of understanding of the climate change influence on the extreme event, and the vertical axis measures our capabilities to observe and to simulate the extreme event. So the confidence is higher when the attribution is based on physical understanding of how anthropogenic forces are affecting that specific type of extreme event, and also when we have long and high-quality observational records to detect changes in the extreme event, and when we have models that are able to replicate the extreme event that we want to attribute, and when all these lines of evidence agree, okay? So as a consequence, some extreme events are, let's say, more attributable than others. They are easier to attribute to climate change. In particular, confidence is higher for thermodynamical extreme events, such as cold spells or heat waves, and it is much lower for extreme events that occur on a small spatiotemporal scales, or those that are under a strong dynamical control. Right? And this is because the dynamical aspects of climate change are less well understood than those related to the thermodynamics. Another question is, which are the essential ingredients for make an attribution study? And well, usually the studies work around two concepts that need to be well understood. The first one is the class of extreme events. Okay, when we attribute a particular extreme event, that extreme event is unique. So we need to define a class of extreme events that allow to manage to perform some statistics. Okay, so this class of extreme events are similar to some extent to the event that we want to attribute. And then another important concept in attribution is the construction of two worlds: the factual world, which is the world that it is now, with all forcings, all causal factors going on, and the counterfactual world, which is a world that could have been without some of the causal factors, usually anthropogenic forcings. Okay, so then we can compare that class of event in the two worlds, in the factual and counterfactual world, which allows us to assess the influence on the changes in the probability of occurrence or changes in the intensity of the event. Okay, so this is the overall idea in attribution, but typically there are many steps involved in the construction of an attribution study, as illustrated in this figure on the left. And almost all steps require some choices, and some decisions need to be made. And all these decisions conform the attribution study. They define how the extreme event is going to be studied, and that can affect the result. And that means that the result of the attribution depends on how the attribution question is framed. And that is why we say that the framing of the attribution question is critical, because there are many different questions that can be asked to the same event, and different questions can give different answers. So to illustrate this, I rescued this figure on the right, which was from a study that conciliated two apparently contradictory attribution statements for the European heatwave of 2010. At that time, there was one study claiming that that event was largely due to internal variability, and another study claiming that it was mainly that climate change increased the probability of occurrence of that event. So in this third study, it was found that there was no contradiction at all between these two studies, because they were answering different questions. This is illustrated here in the figure. It shows the return periods of monthly mean temperatures over Western Russia, where the heatwave occurred, for the factual world in red and the counterfactual world in blue, and the red arrows identify the change in the intensity of the event and changes in the probability of occurrence of the event due to climate change. And as you can see, the size of the arrows is different, meaning that the change in intensity due to climate change was small. So most of the magnitude of the event was due to internal variability, as stated by the first paper, but that small warming led to large increases in the probability of occurrence of the event, meaning that climate change significantly increased by large magnitude the probability of occurrence of that event. Okay, so both studies were right. And it's just very important to explicitly state the question that we want to answer. And finally, I would like to illustrate a couple of examples of attribution methods that are quite common in the literature. There are many ways of linking extreme events to climate change, and they often provide complementary answers to the same event, okay? And here I illustrate a couple of examples. One is often called the probabilistic framework. The other one is the mechanistic framework. The first one mainly is more a climatological oriented approach. It relies on the simulation of climates for the factual and counterfactual world, which can be an historical run and a naturalized run from the CENIP models, for example. From these two worlds, one can retrieve the PDFs of the variable of interest, which can be the temperature, for example, if we are interested in heat waves. And then we impose a threshold, which is the observed magnitude of the event that we want to attribute. And we can quantify the probability of exceeding that threshold in the two worlds, the actual world and the counterfactual world. So here we provide a measure of how climate change has changed the probability of an event of that magnitude, okay? So in this approach, this is an unconditional approach because we are concerned about all extreme events above that threshold, no matter how the extreme events occur. We are not concerned about the processes or the factors that were involved in the actual event that we want to attribute. The other approach is a mechanistic approach, and we can say it's much more methodologically oriented because it is concerned about the event itself, not about the climate in general, okay? So in this, these are conditional approaches that focus on explicitly simulating the extreme event in two worlds, how the extreme event would have been in a factual and in a counterfactual world, okay? In this case, in order to that, the studies often impose some conditional factors. So in these attribution approaches, the class of event is reduced to those extreme events that have specific characteristics, those that occur under specific conditional factors that also occur at the time of the event that we want to attribute, okay? So we are focusing only on a subset of extreme events and not all of them, only those that occur under given circumstances. Okay, in this case, we can also build probability distributions for the factual and counterfactual worlds, as in the unconditional approach. But in this case, these probabilities are conditioned. Okay, so we are only providing a partial attribution, which is restricted to those extreme events that occur under those specific circumstances. Okay. The conditional factors that are often employed in these kind of approaches can be the SSTs, for example, but also the atmospheric circulation, okay? So these are typical examples of attribution studies, but there are too many, and it's often good to compare them. And now I'm going to start with the second part of the presentation, which is I will illustrate a couple of examples that have been published in the literature for the attribution of the European heatwave of 2022. And I would like to start providing the historical context of that summer. In the left figure here shows the frequency distribution of European summer temperatures since 1500 until 2023. It has been obtained by combining an observational product, which is GISTEMP, the database, which goes to 1880, and this data set has been extended back in time using the reconstruction of Lutherbacher et al. But we obtain the same results if we confine only the analysis to the instrumental period. Okay, so vertical lines here identify every single summer of that period, and on the left you can see the 5 coldest summers, on the right the 5 warmest ones. And as you can see, 2022 is the warmest European summer on record by a large margin. Okay, it exceeded the previous record-breaking summer of 2022, which was the previous record-breaking one. And an interesting aspect of this list of 5 warmest summers is that landmark summer, an outlier summer just a few years ago, which was 2003, is no longer within the list of the top 5. It has been moved out of that list by 2023. So the last 3 summers, 21, 22, 23, are among the 5 warmest on record right now. Okay, on the right you can see the spatial maps, the maps of the seasonal mean temperature anomalies for those summers, including here 2003 and the other top 5 summers. Okay, they are arranged here chronologically, and we can see that some of record-breaking summers in the past, for example 2003, 2010, were characterized by outstanding temperature anomalies confined to specific regions of the continent, Western and Eastern Europe, respectively. But in other parts of the continent, there were near normal or even colder than normal temperatures. Differently, more recent record-breaking summers have displayed warm temperatures elsewhere, all over the continent, and there are no so clear signatures of mega heat waves such as those that occur in 2003 and 2010. So suggesting that in this case, the heat waves that occurred during these summers mainly affected different regions of the continent throughout the summer. In order to support this hypothesis, we employed an automatic algorithm which allows us to identify large-scale heatwave patterns, heatwave events. Okay, the algorithm takes into account the changing spatiotemporal nature of heatwave patterns, heatwave conditions, and it first starts by identifying those regions that are recording local heatwave conditions at the same time. All these regions, if they are contiguous, they are clustered under the same spatial pattern, and then that pattern is tracked in time. So we follow the spatiotemporal evolution of these heatwave patterns. Okay, in doing so, we can identify heatwave episodes that affected Europe that summer in 2022. And we identify several of them, but here I summarize the most prominent ones, which occur in June, July, and August. They affected different regions, as we expected, mainly Iberia during the June heatwave, Western Europe, and northeastern part of the continent. Here the colors indicate the frequency, the relative frequency of local heatwave conditions during the duration of that episode. Okay, note that the episode changed in space and time. Okay, and the contours represent the mean geopotential heat anomalies at 500 hectopascals. So we can see that the 3 heat waves were associated with high pressure anomalies, anticyclonic conditions, which is common in Europe, but these spatial patterns display different signatures for the different heatwave events. In the case of June, that pattern fitted into the so-called subtropical ridge, which is an intrusion of warm and stable air from North Africa. In the case of the August heatwave, it was mainly associated that high pressure system was mainly associated with a blocking pattern, which is a high pressure system at high latitude that is isolated from the subtropical belt. And the July heatwave was a hybrid structure, mostly fitting into the subtropical ridge category, but at the end of the life cycle of that event, it evolved towards a blocking pattern. Okay, so for the attribution, I'm going to focus mainly on this heat wave, the July heat wave that is in the middle pattern. And here I have selected two examples of attribution studies that are have been published or are in the process of being published for that specific heat wave. The first one is this one coming from Zakaria et al. It was published right after the heat wave, and they focus it on the 2-day period when the UK for the first time recorded maximum temperatures above 40 degrees. Okay, so they focus it on that specific event, which is the 2-day mean temperature over this specific region of the UK. Here they follow with the probabilistic framework that I mentioned it before. So they work with the temperature series here, and they fitted this series to a theoretical distribution, which is a generalized extreme value distribution, in order to model the behavior of the tail of the distribution. This statistical model is made non-stationary by introducing a covariate, which is the global mean temperature, which provides a measure of the influence of climate change on the occurrence of extreme events in this region. In doing so, it's possible to obtain the return periods of for two different values of the covariate for two different levels of global warming. Okay, so here you can see the two return curves. The red one corresponds to the factual world. I mean, at the present day world, the blue one would be the equivalent return period, but for pre-industrial conditions, okay, for lower values of the global mean temperature. The magenta line here, the horizontal line, is the observed magnitude of the event that we want to attribute, which was an event that corresponded to a very unlikely event even in the present day climate, because it corresponded to an event that occurs once in 100 years. But an event of that magnitude would have been virtually impossible in a pre-industrial climate, because it never crosses the blue curve. Okay, so we can also compute the change in the intensity due to the climate change, which is given by the vertical arrow, and all these two metrics, the probability ratio and the change in intensity for the ERA 5 reanalysis, which is this example, is shown on the right. Okay, with the uncertainty estimates. And the same analysis is applied to different data sets, including different types of model simulations are shown here. Okay, and then they provide a synthesis report by combining all evidence from models and observations. So the authors conclude that climate change made the UK event at least 10 times more likely and 2 degrees warmer than in a pre-industrial climate. So this is an example of an unconditional attribution, okay, for that specific event. And now I'm going to illustrate another example which corresponds to the other type of the extreme attribution that I mentioned before, which is the conditional attribution. And in this case, it's the analog method, and which can be applied to both models and observations. And in this case, I'm going to illustrate the example for the observations. So this figure here illustrates how the analog method works. Let's consider one single day of the heat wave, which is illustrated here. This is the temperature of that day. This day is associated with an corresponding atmospheric circulation, which is here shown by the anomalies of geopotential height at 500 hectopascals. So the method searches for analogs of that conditional factor of the atmospheric circulation in the historical record. Here you can see n samples of the best analogs, the best days with the closest atmospheric circulation to that of that day. And these analogs have a corresponding temperature associated, so we can reconstruct the expected temperature under the occurrence of the conditional factor, which was the atmospheric circulation at the time of the extreme event. Okay, so basically this analog method reconstructs the expected temperature, the expected target, given the conditional factor, the predictor, which is in this case the atmospheric circulation. This method can be applied for attribution by splitting the period into subperiods. One is a recent period with higher influences of anthropogenic forces, and another one is a past period with reduced levels of anthropogenic forces, okay? And this is what we have done here for the July heatwave of 2022. In this case, we have focused on this box here, which is more or less France, when the temperatures were the highest during that heat wave, which is defined as the period between 13 and 19 July 2022. Okay, so this is our target, the temperature, the mean temperature over this period. And here the contours illustrate the anomalies in the atmospheric circulation for that period. Okay, so we use the analog method, and we searched for flow analogs over this large spatial domain in order to reconstruct the temperatures over this box. Okay, in the middle, the figure in the middle, you can see the whiskers. Just pay attention to the dark ones. Okay, the dark whiskers show the temperature anomalies reconstructed from flow analogs of two different periods. The first period corresponded to the first half, more or less, of the 20th century. The second period was the second half and the beginning of the 21st century. You can see that the two distributions are significantly different, meaning that the same atmospheric circulation is now causing warmer temperatures than in the past. Or if you want, if this atmospheric circulation would have occurred at the beginning of the 20th century, the heat wave would have been at least 1 degree colder than it was actually. Okay, this method does not only allow us to compute changes in the intensity and the magnitude of the event, but also changes in the probability of occurrence, as illustrated on the right. These are the frequency, the cumulative frequency of analog days with temperature anomalies above a given value. Okay, so we can see that this is for the present day in red and the past periods in blue. And we can see that, for example, the probability of this atmospheric circulation leading to temperature anomalies above 4 degrees is now 5 times more likely than it was at the beginning of the 20th century. Okay, so as I stated at the beginning of the presentation, the analog method can be employed to, the attribution is not only concerned with climate change influences, but in general with the influences of any causal factors that contribute to an event. And so here we also employ the flow analog to explore the potential influences of other drivers in amplifying, exacerbating the magnitude of the heat wave. Okay, in this case, this example is for the June heat wave of 2022. Here we focus it on two potential drivers of that heat wave, which are the soil moisture and over southwestern Europe, and SST's anomalies over western Mediterranean. These figures on the left show the anomalies at the beginning of that summer, so meaning that dry soils were dry and SSTs were much warmer than normal. Okay, indeed, there was an intense drought and a marine heat wave going on by May and June, before the summer, okay, before the heat wave. On the right, again, we can see the box plots, the distributions of the temperatures, again, focus only on the dark boxes, okay? These are the temperature anomalies that are reconstructed from flow analogs of the June heat wave that are preceded by different combinations of states in these two drivers. Okay, so we build 4 different combinations that include wet soils with warm SSTs, wet and cold combination, dry warm, and dry cold combination. and these are illustrated here on the horizontal axis, and these are the expected temperatures under these constraints, okay? And we can see that in all cases, of course, we obtain positive temperature anomalies because we are constraining the atmospheric circulation that occurring during the heat wave, but there are differences, and the warmest temperatures are reconstructed for the combination of dry soils and warm SSTs, which were the states that were observed at the time of the June heat wave, meaning that these two drivers potentially contributed to intensify the event. In fact, this reconstruction is close to the anomaly. The reconstructed anomaly is pretty close to that was observed at that time. Okay, and finally, I would like to illustrate an example of the work that we are doing within the CLINT project in order to explore the potential value of or the added value of machine learning algorithms for the attribution of extreme events. This is an ongoing work. And here I illustrate an example, which is using the vocabulary of the machine learning community. That would be an anomaly detection method. So here what we have is it is based on an autoencoder that employs convolutional networks, two-dimensional convolutional networks. Okay, the autoencoder has two parts, two components. The encoder, which compresses the input information into a reduced space that is also called the latent space. And then we have the decoder, which reconstructs the original input fields from that latent space. Okay, so what we have is an input and then an output, which is the reconstruction done by the autoencoder of this input field. Okay, in this case, the input are temperature fields over Europe. Okay, this is a sequence of daily maps of temperature over the continent. Okay, and here we have used this method for attribution. The strategy works as follows. We have trained the autoencoder in a natural climate as simulated by a climate model, and using as input the European fields of temperature. So the autoencoder is going to learn the variability and the signatures, the essential climate signatures that are congruent with a natural climate. Okay, it's going to learn only what is going on in a natural climate. Okay, then once the autoencoder has been trained, it is applied in, let's say, in a predictive mode, but using as input the temperature maps from an historical simulation. I mean, a period with anthropogenic forcings. This is our factual work, okay? So these input fields are introduced in the autoencoder, and here the autoencoder is passive, and it tries to reconstruct the input fields. And it's going to reconstruct these input fields, but using the relationships and the variability that the autoencoder has learned from the natural climate. So meaning that we are going to reconstruct a naturalized version of this actual event. Okay, so the difference between this reconstruction and the original one provides a measure of the climate change influence on the event. Okay, when we train the algorithm, I forgot to mention that during the training of the algorithm, we compute the performance of the autoencoder by comparing the output with the input, and this allows us to define a threshold, an upper threshold, above which any other value would be very unlikely in this natural world. Okay, so when the difference between this naturalized version of the factual event, when this difference is above that threshold, we can say that we have detected a climate change signal. Okay, because the difference is above the upper limit that we could expect from the training step. I'm not sure if I was clear enough, but this we are working on in this, and here I illustrate a couple of preliminary results that we have obtained This is the training of the autoencoder. The training has been done in natural simulations of the Hadjian model, using 9 members for the validation, for the training, and 1 member has been saved for testing and validation of the method. The training, the performance improves quite fast with time, with the epochs and the generations, and meaning that we do not need very long data sets for training. We have also testing that the autoencoder trained in this model is able to reconstruct the natural simulations in other models. We are testing this. And there are several sets of this method, potential added value of this method. The first one is that once the autoencoder has been trained in the pre-industrial climate, the reconstruction of a natural version of an event can be done in real time. I mean, it's very fast method to provide how the factual event would have been in a natural climate. Okay, it is quite fast. This is one of the advantages. Another one is that the method can provide attribution for each grid point and for each day of the event, because we can reconstruct the spatiotemporal evolution of the event as illustrated in this example. This was a heat wave that was simulated in the historical period of the model, and the colors here indicate all regions, all grid points and days when the temperature was above that upper threshold that we have defined before, meaning that all these grid points would be identified as very unlikely would have been very unlikely in the pre-industrial climate. We can also quantify changes in the magnitude of the event because we given as the exceedances of the observed temperatures above that threshold. And an additional set of the method is that this is a variational autoencoder, actually, meaning that the latent space is described by parameters that have an associated distribution. And that means that we can build an ensemble of reconstructions of the event. I mean, multiple realizations of the natural version of that event, okay? This is an example for an event that in this case was simulated in the natural simulation, in the natural climate. This is the event that was simulated, I mean the observed one in the model world, which correspond to a heat wave in Iberia. And here you can see an example, one sample of the reconstructed event in that natural world, and this is the mean of the ensemble, which shows high resemblance with the original value. So I think that I talk too much, but just as a summary, we are working on the application of these machine learning algorithms, and up to now we have obtained promising results, and this method, if can be implemented, would have several advantages because we do not rely on spatiotemporal averages that are often employed for classical attribution. The method that we have developed so far is unconditional because we are only using temperature as input, but it can be made conditional, just including other channels in the input that account, for example, for the atmospheric circulation associated with that temperature fields. And we do not rely either on covariates or counterfactual. We do not need counterfactual estimates of some conditional factors as in other methods, and we do not fit the data to distribution. So there are several advantages as compared to classical methods, but also some cons because this method is not fully explainable. So that would be difficult to justify the result unless this is compared with the classical methods. And this is what we are working right now. I think and that's all from my side. So thank you for your attention.
Thank you, David, for this amazing presentation, and it was very interesting. And now there is the time for some questions. So first of all, we received a question about from Silvia Petrignano, and she's asking some explanation about this distinction between factual and counterfactual words, because maybe there was some confusion there.
Yeah, the fact is that, well, usually when we attribute particular extreme events, it's often attributed to climate change, but this is not the only causal factor we can account for. And when the objective of the attribution question is attributing or linking extreme events to climate change, we have to compare how that extreme event could have been in a world without anthropogenic influences, because the question is how much, if and how much climate change anthropogenic forces have affected that particular event, have changed the probability or the intensity of that event. And in order to answer that question, we need to reconstruct somehow the event or a class of event that is similar to the event that we want to attribute in two worlds. A world, the factual world is the present-day world with anthropogenic forces, and the counterfactual world is a world without anthropogenic forces. Okay, and we compare that the characteristics of some observable of that extreme event in these two worlds: the world that it is now with climate change and a world without climate change. And the question is that there are many ways of constructing these two worlds. The factual world can be the present-day world, and you can get it from observations and from simulations of the present-day climate using the external forces. It is often much more challenging to obtain estimates of the counterfactual world, okay, because it is often a world that never existed. So we have to imagine how could have been. Okay, and this can be done with climate simulation, using, for example, pre-industrial runs when the anthropogenic forces have been set to pre-industrial levels. So the anthropogenic influences on climate have been reduced. But we can also use observations and compare two different worlds: a present-day climate, which could be, as I illustrate in the analog method, which is a recent period, and a past period that had reduced levels of anthropogenic forces. So the difference between them is mainly due to climate change. I'm not sure if I was more clear or not.
I think you were clear. So we have another question about well, the study in another variable. So it is a question from Eleonora Melandri, and she's asking if there are some studies similar to this one related to extreme rainfall.
Similar studies to what?
Maybe using the autoencoder also, or the analogs.
Okay, no. To my knowledge, I don't know. This is the first attempt to explicitly perform attribution with an autoencoder, and we have started with temperature because these heat waves are often easier to attribute to climate change, so we can have more confidence in their results. And the idea would be to, of course, to apply to other types of extreme events. For example, droughts, particular types of droughts that are also affected by the thermodynamics, and then moving to other kind of extreme events, including high precipitation events. But we did not test right now the performance of the autoencoder in this case in reconstructing precipitation. I can anticipate that it will be much more challenging. Yeah.
Okay, there is also a question regarding this machine learning approach from Benedetta Sestito. She's asking if is this machine learning approach already in use for impact attribution?
No, not yet. I would love it, but we are just focusing on the attribution of the extreme event, I mean the hazard, and I'm not sure. if that it would be possible to make impact assessment. I guess, but we need other impact models to train the autoencoder to learn the relationships that are going on. And I also anticipate that that would be also a challenge. Yeah.
Yes, there is another about this method. Well, it is a question from Salvatore Pascali. He's asking, the question I want to answer is, even in the new artificial intelligence approach, we still have to rely on GCM simulation to define factual, counterfactual. So we rely on GCM, although we know they have serious issue, for example, with blocking and in general with the dynamical response of the atmosphere to global warming. So what could be a way forward to make extreme events attribution study less dependent on GCM?
Now, that's a good question, and we are discussing it a lot about it.
Yes.
We hopefully expect that the dependence of the results on the model will be less if we train the autoencoder with a multi-model ensemble. And in other exercise of machine learning using model or model simulation, it seems that when you use models with different biases, then the bias is somehow diluted and they focuses on the common aspects that are robust across the multi-model ensemble. But we did not test it yet. And there are other approaches that can be tested in addition to combine or using different a multimodal ensemble, and that could be, for example, to do some transfer learning. I mean, training the autoencoder in a multimodal and then retrain the model or transfer to the reanalysis. So if the model can, the autoencoder is trained with models in a preliminary, but then it also learns some aspects from the reanalysis. So this is also feasible, and this is an option that we are trying. Well, we would like to test. And other approaches involve using some bias correction to the models and then train the autoencoder using the bias corrected models. There are different avenues that can be explored. Yeah.
Okay, there are two questions, but about the historical data. But I will give you one because they are similar, so you can maybe answer both. The attribution studies can be used only on historical data or also to make predictions of extreme events in small areas.
Predictions, I mean future projections or anticipate how I did not illustrate, but it is becoming more and more common because the answer is no longer being if there was an influence of climate change on the extreme event, because we are already living in a world with anthropogenic influences going on and growing. So it's to me it's no longer required to demonstrate to get that there is an anthropogenic influence. It's quite true that it is there, even if we are not able to detect. But it's becoming more and more important to answer the question of how this specific extreme event could occur or could be in the future under stronger influences of anthropogenic forcings, or if other causal factors affecting the extreme events would change in a way or in another. And this is also other approaches such as the storylines, which build feasible futures of the extreme events given different combinations of changes in the causal factors affecting the extreme event. So yeah, and it's becoming quite more common to also illustrate how that extreme event could be in the future in order to take some adaptive strategies or for planning purposes. Yeah.
Yes, and about this method of the machine learning that you were presented at the end, there is a question from Elliot Walt. You suggest conditioning by adding more channel in the input. From my understanding, this assumes that we are interested in variables on the same region of interest. What will it take, in your opinion, to condition on spatio-temporally distant variables? So, for instance, some teleconnections?
Yeah, I guess that it would be also possible, but I'm not sure if that would be feasible with our sources, okay? Because as you increase the size of the spatial domain that you train and the channels, the input channels, I mean, and use multivariable input, then the training is more expensive. So I guess that it would be possible, but also we need to take into account that we need to give some ideally we will need to give some explanation and understanding of what's going on. So if you introduce a lot of fields, input fields, and for many regions, then the physical explanation and the connections between the fields would be more complicated to interpret. So, but in principle, I guess it would be possible. Yeah.
Okay, and then the last question. Sorry, I have to summarize some of the questions because there are a lot, but we will try to reply to all of you after this and give to David all the questions. And the last one is about this about the method and of attribution. So Farah Salem, he said that I would like to ask the statistical approach you mentioned for attribution of extreme events. If he's wondering if it's also available in GitHub or something like notebooks, or if it's already, I mean, public, this kind
No,
of.
not yet. This is in preparation. Yeah, the paper is in preparation. We will make it available within the CLINT project, but not yet. We are still testing and working on that. Yeah.
Okay. So, well, I think we have to finish now because we are already, we are on time. So thanks again to David for this very interesting presentation. And thanks to all the audience to be here, and because we were in a very good number of attendees, of participants of this webinar. So see you in the next one. Have a good afternoon.
Bye bye.
Bye.